Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today, my guest is Levent Yildizgoren. For the past 3 decades, he's been a mentor, a visiting lecturer at the University of Essex, and author of Good Business in Any Language. Levent is also the co-founder of TTC We Translate, a multi-award-winning translation and localization company. He helps businesses scale in other countries by utilizing translation services in over 100 languages, so your message can be accepted and understood. Levent talks about the importance of breaking the language barrier so your business can grow. So join us today as we delve into his lingo model that can help any company expand into new global markets. It's going to be a very interesting discussion today. Levent, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
It's great. It's a great pleasure to be with you, Jeff. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So I was really interested in your background. So not only as as a visiting lecturer, but you also run a company, that talks about translations. And I was telling you in a pre-call, I speak a couple of languages, and I mix them all up all the time. So can we just talk a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how you became so amazing?
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I'm originally from Turkey, but I lived longer in the UK than I lived in my own country. And what led me into the localization and translation business was a mixture of coincidences as well as my and my wife's ambition to run our own businesses. We didn't want to when we wanted to talk about running our own business, we didn't see dollar signs or pound signs. We just wanted to be in control of our future and the future of our children. And I'm originally from printing background, and when I say printing, that is the manual printing before the digitalization, which enabled me to understand the color, the reproduction, graphic reproduction. So I'm really grateful for the 15 years that I spent in printing industry. And then when we had our first child, my wife didn't want to go back to full-time employment. So she set up a small boutique translation company. And in 1995, to help a colleague of ours, we acquired their business. And then the opportunity came forward for me to join the company because we had a large contract. And within 2 weeks, I resigned from my position where I was the director of a printing company and gave up my company car and just went heading to the business. Thinking about it, at the time, we didn't have any purchase order from the client. We didn't have any contracts, any guarantees. It was just a gut feeling. And we didn't have a luxury of checking everything on an Excel spreadsheet. So it wasn't a logical decision. It was more like an emotional decision, which I'm glad we've taken with 2 small children, UK in recession time, mortgage to pay. None of these sort of prevented us taking that leap forward. And here we are after 30 years. Never looked back, and we've gone from strength to strength. Initially, we were doing only English into Turkish, Turkish into English. Now we cover 100 languages, and also helping companies grow globally. So this is my story.
I love it. I love the entrepreneurial spirit, the emotional part of taking, of just taking a leap. And then figuring out the details later. And I find that a lot of people, when they do that leap, it's never the right time to do it, right? There's never a specific time that you can say like, okay, today's going to be great. Unless you win the lottery, of course, right? But most people don't have that. And what's interesting is that being able to, to parlay your skills into something that you can actually use and help out other businesses as well is, that's really the true gift, right? That's really where,
Yeah.
where the magic really happens.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about your business, about the translation business in general. I
Yeah.
have dealt with a number of translators in various capacities, and also various professional levels. Let's just say,
Right.
some are just really amateur, and others it's like stellar work. What goes into like a higher end world class translation service versus someone who grew up in country and happens to
Yeah.
speak
Yeah.
two or more languages? What's the big difference there?
Well, very, very good question. I love that question, Jeff, because speaking a language and translating it, I've found myself that in that position 30 years ago. Then I realized that it's not the same thing at all. Of course, speaking the language natively is very important. As a rule of thumb, we translators never translate into anything other than our mother tongue. So if I was to translate, I will translate from English into Turkish. Like my accountant used to say, if you do something and you're very good at it, you end up running it. So I loved doing translations, getting the words translated into Turkish and getting the results for my customers. But then, as the business grew, I ended up running it. So sadly, I'm not doing any translations anymore. But the biggest difference is that a translator needs to understand the language, subject matter, and the requirements of the target audience. So let me give you an example. In high context languages, Turkish is one, English is another in certain respects. There's no single form for, say, for instance, you. So if I was to say you to an elderly person, I would use a more formal version than speaking to my wife or my children or my daughter-in-law or son-in-law. I would use a normal informal version of you. And this is all about getting connection with the target audience. Just imagine you're doing marketing for a company that does something for professionals with a high ticket value, and the language is wrong. There will be, you know very well, you're in marketing. If the language doesn't resonate with them, they will be disconnected straight away. And so the use of language for the target audience and, of course, the subject matter expertise are very, very important. So for translators to do translation productively and effectively, I would say they need good 3 to 5 years. We have translators that's been doing this for the last 20, 30 years. And even for them, they learn something every day. I think it's the best part, that having an open mind and having a mindset that the learning process never ends. So for a translator versus a native speaker, the biggest difference is the skill and understanding nuances of the language. And of course, also another important point, Jeff, using lots of tools. So our translators are professionals, but they use a lot of tools, technical tools. So tools for glossary management, tools for databases. So it is human translations done with lots of technology. So a translator is very interesting, has to know has to embrace quite a few different skills. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
So one of the things that always gets me is the difference between translations, where you're just, I don't know, translating a birth certificate, right? Because that's a use case,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
then there's also transcreation, right? Where you don't just want to take a set of words and convert them into Spanish, convert them into Portuguese, convert them into Turkish, right? You want, like you said, you want the translation you want the translated, the end product to actually resonate.
Yeah,
And that may not necessarily be a word for word translation of what you're
absolutely.
trying to do. How do you help your clients in the transcreation process?
Well,
You
yeah,
know, when they don't need a legal word for word translation for
yeah,
something.
yeah. Great question, Jeff. Because it's all about getting our customers' message to their target audience. So this is purely our job as translation service providers. Understanding what our customers want to do is the most important part. So the before the translation can actually start, it is important to understand what is customer trying to achieve. So getting a product to the target audience, making sure that the language used is appropriate, and often direct translation doesn't work. There's some very famous examples, like when Pepsi wanted to go into Chinese market, a translation that wasn't tuned to the Chinese language sounded something like Pepsi will bring your ancestors back to life. So they had to sit down and re-adapt the slogan to the Chinese language, where it is a very high context language, and everything has to make sense in 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 for that culture. So transcreation is very much understanding what the message of the customer is, and then adapting it for the target audience. So it is very hard, because sometimes it could be 10 words that needs to be translated. But if it is wrong, the cost of doing this is very high for the customer, because the target audience will never get the message. And if they don't get the message, as you know, they will never make that purchasing decision.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. That makes a lot
My
of
pleasure.
sense. In terms of creating, creating an understandable message, in your target company. Let's talk a little bit about how to really put this into practice, right? And this is part of your one big tip, which is, in order to expand your business on a global level, you need to be able to compartmentalize the message so that you're saying the same thing, or at least alluding to the same thing within those different languages,
Yeah,
right? Let's talk a little bit about that. How does that look in your world?
yeah. Um, well, again, thank you for asking me that question. Now, when a company would like to grow globally, and we all know how sensible that is and how important that is. Thinking about, for instance, Apple gets 58% of their income outside the USA. So if you were to take away the international expansion part of Apple wouldn't be the 2 trillion US dollar company today. Is it 2 trillion, or but who's counting? And that goes on for that is also true for many global brands. So international growth brings a lot of benefits for the business, and this is also true for small to medium sized businesses. But what I noticed, Jeff, working with dozens of customers over the 30 years, the ones who have been successful have always followed a methodology. And the ones that have made mistakes that I have come across many times over were rushing into things without following a system. Then I realized, hold on, this is not a rocket science. So how comes experienced business development managers, directors getting this wrong? Then I realized that it is actually the lack of following a methodology. That is how I. This is how I. This is why I created the LINGO model. It is a 5-step simple model that people can follow. Any size of business can follow to go uh, to really go global and get their global vision realized. Um,
So it's interesting that you put this together in a framework, right? Because frameworks are really what helps any business scale beyond one person, right? I mean, if you go into a McDonald's, whether it's here, the UK, Turkey, anywhere in the world, you're going to get basically the same product,
Yes.
right? The reason
Yes.
why they did that is because they have a framework for how products are sourced, how their products are assembled, and how they're presented to the client.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As the end product.
That's a lovely example. That's a lovely example.
So what is lingo? What are those parts? Like how can someone take a language translation and apply that to a framework as opposed to just going to Google Translate and translating the words?
Yeah, I mean, it is beyond translation because, translation is part of it, but the model is really for a business executive who would like to go global, for them to use it. The first, LINGO stands for L for learn the market, I for information gathering, N for navigate the market, G for go operational, and O for open for business. If you start from the first one, learn the market, it is about making enough tangible, fit for purpose researches before making a decision to go into this new market. I've seen so many companies being disappointed because they didn't make this enough researches before taking action. So one customer who has very successful product in the UK is an industrial solvent, very very successful product. Just on somebody's word, they decided to go into Polish market. So the minimum amount is 5,000 units, labeling, repackaging, translations, and everything, only to find out that there was not enough demand. So the managing director says, never again. We'll never go international. Now, how sad this is, because they have a lovely product, and chances are their product is demanded in other countries. They just didn't make enough researches before taking that step. So Lingo, the first step is learn the market, understanding, is there a demand for this product? And this can be done desk-based, something simple as using Google search or Google keyword tool to understand what is the search volume in this country for this, say for instance, taking that industrial solvent, what are the search volumes? If the search volumes are not tangible or not enough for them to come up with a viable decision or viable business case, then look for another market. So that step is very important to shortlist maybe 2-3 countries or 2-3 marketplaces before making any decisions. Then the next step is information gathering. So if, say, you shortlist a market, then it's important to gather information. For instance, UK is part of Europe, but in Spain, not far away, consumers have different habits. Like it's very common in the UK for businesses to have a 30-minute lunch break or eating while working. But in Spain, in France, the lunch break is 1.5 to 2 hours. So even within this, within the European continent, there are different habits. Even some countries, Christmas holidays are different. Easter holidays are different. So there are so many differences that business executive needs to be aware of before taking that further. So information gathering makes this possible. And then comes the next step, navigate the market. This is going really deep in that market. And here, it is the stage that business has to decide, am I going direct to the consumers? Or if it is business to business, am I going direct? Am I using a distributor? Am I using a representative? Or am I using an online marketplaces? Because each step requires different arrangements, different preparations. Online marketplaces, there are thousands of online marketplaces, depending on the product, depending on the target audience. Okay, Amazon, eBay, we all know about them, but there are so many others. For Japan, for instance, online marketplaces have a different flavor altogether. Something called Rakuten is very important, and in Japan, the target audience is over 100 million. And for the Japanese customer, in order to reach them, it has to be in Japanese. Anything that is not Japanese is very unlikely to attract attention. Unless, of course, if it is something like a sort of very high value, very expensive luxury item, then it could be a different story. But for most of the stuff, it needs to be localized into Japanese for it to attract attention of Japanese consumers. So navigating the market is critical in that respect. And here's at this stage, maybe joint ventures could be a viable step. So all that stuff needs to be taken in stages. And then comes the going operational, because this is the implementation stage. And I've also seen many companies doing the 3 stages but not implementing it. What happens then? Somebody else may walk in. They may lose motivation. We are all human. Business executives who make things happen may lose motivation if they leave it too long. So to do this in a timely manner, to take everything together and implementing that is very, very important. And once the implementation is done and it is operational, of course, then business executives and the businesses has to look for mitigating circumstances, because things may change, demands may change, there could be seasonal differences depending on the product or service. So the last stage, open for business, is that stage where a business executive just monitors the progress and look for anything that requires their attention. So it is very much following those steps for any business, and I've seen many businesses being very successful in their international expansion.
When you see a business that follows this framework, that follows this methodology from L to O, right? What have you seen as the net effect for how their business grows in the target country? What kind of differences have you seen, those that just go part of the way versus those that go all the way?
Yeah. It's a good question, Jeff. Now, it is very interesting. I mean, they say business executives need to know their numbers. And when you look at the numbers, everything makes sense or it doesn't make sense. It's very difficult to talk oneself into, looking at the numbers and saying something else is impossible. For example, one of my customers, 5 years ago, their revenues, more than 50%, I think it was 60 or maybe between 50 to 60% was coming from UK market. Now, their turnover is trebled and the UK market only is like 25%. So the picture is unbelievable, because you have the same product, you have the same expertise, you have almost the same team, but you're adding a new channel. It is very, very interesting that when Apple said that they are taking iPhone to China, their share has increased so much because everyone realized that, hold on, it's all about market demand and saturation. By having a new market, Apple sent signals to the stock market saying that, guys, we're going to be selling a lot of these, because in China there's like, a few 100 million customers who are likely to buy our product. So same for a small business, the company that I'm mentioning. Now, 25% of their income is just from the UK, and the rest is from around the world. And when it comes to doing translations that is producing the same user manual in different languages, they love spending money because they know that by every time they add a language, their revenue is going to increase. It's very interesting that the pressure to translate comes from the sales department, because sales department says, look, I need this in German. I've got customers in Germany saying that, we need a German website to understand the product better. And so the pressure actually comes from the salespeople, because they know that by adding a language, there's more of the sales going to come from that marketplace. So the picture is, I'm not trying to draw an easy kind of picture. It is, the initial part is the hardest part, but the rewards are so high. The companies who've been doing this persistently is getting a lot of rewards, and the best thing is they don't have to rely on their domestic market. When things go a bit wrong in the domestic market, when things go downturn, or there's competition, then they have always another market to rely on.
Wow, what an amazing explanation. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
The thing is that, at least here in the US, the times that we deal with, with international brands, I don't know, probably the biggest one, only because we have one down the street, is IKEA. Right. So every time I buy a bookcase, I have to go through pages of these, disclaimers and everything in 16 different languages. And then I have to read these pictograms in order to get it to work. And the funny thing is that it works, right? Works in Polish, works in Turkish, works in Arabic, works in Thai, and it works in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So, it's, it really is that important in order to be able to touch those different, communities. So I really appreciate you delving into that. Can you please let everyone know how they can learn more about your company and how they can reach out to you directly?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll be only pleased to hear from your listeners if they have a question about international expansion, going into a new market, and or it could be something to do with cultural language barriers, how to overcome them. So I'll be only happy to hear from them. And also, I'd love to offer my book free download to your listeners. And I can see the long website URL link on under my name, or they can just visit levent.team, and it will take them to a link where they can download the ebook. And there are also a couple of goodies. It's totally free of charge. And once they read the book, watch a video, and they have questions, I'll be only happy to answer any questions they may have.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to come on the show today.
My pleasure.
Talk about your expertise. It's, it's a lot of fun to talk about these things and how they affect businesses in very profound ways. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jeff. It was my total pleasure to be on your show.